I don't know where she hired her lawyers. I feel like they're from Toys R Us. Like what is happening with them?
You're listening to the Laughing Couple podcast with your hosts, Brittany and Ryan Ostafy. Join them weekly as they discuss topics such as relationships, kids, sex, parenting, all unfiltered and all with a healthy dose of laughter. Please welcome your hosts, Brittany and Ryan Ostafy.
Okay, so we have Danielle. I'm gonna botch it. Don't tell me. Dell'Olio?
Dell'Olio, yeah, you did great.
Yes.
Oh, thanks. And I literally just asked her and I was like, I'm gonna screw this up. It's gonna be a very different interview we have today, but I'm like super stoked about it.
Yeah, we are not current event human beings. We have 2 kids, so nothing's current. We're still living like 8 years ago in our coolness.
That's not true. Speak
No,
for
that's
yourself.
not true.
Yeah.
But this is certainly not a platform where we talk about current events on a regular basis. But this event in particular is such a hot topic. And when it came across our desk and the opportunity to speak with you directly about it, we thought, like, why would we not take advantage of this? And what we're talking right now is Johnny Depp, Amber Heard.
Yes. Danielle, can you give us a little bit of a background about who you are, what you're doing, what you're about, and then we're gonna get into some stuff.
Yeah. So I'm Danielle Dell'Olio. I have, I guess, a TikTok platform now. I was working for the Walt Disney Company in 2020 when everything shut down.
Right.
I had nothing to do, I guess, like the rest of the world. So I spent my spare time looking at the Johnny Depp Amber Heard court documents. And it's so weird how life is, because I actually went to school for journalism and criminology. I did a double major in that. And in starting looking at their court documents, I was bothering my friends and family with all of this useless information that no one's ever going to need about this couple that no one knows about. Yeah. And they were like, just like stop talking to me. So I started talking about it on my TikTok. My TikTok originally was just going to be like my Facebook is, like just a bunch of compiled memories, like my own personal life. And you can still see I've got like I rescued a kitten, like just stupid stuff that I'd done for my friends. And then as soon as I started talking about Johnny and Amber, I got about 17,000 followers. And then oddly enough, I started talking. There was this girl I was swiping through one day, and she said, what is a true crime that you think everyone should know about that nobody does, or something to that effect? And I stitched her and I started talking about how when I was young, I was born in Florida, but I've lived most of my life in Canada. Now I'm back in Florida. The world is weird. Yeah. But when I was young, this girl went missing about 20 minutes away from me. Her name was Maddie Clifton, and she was about the same age as me. So it's kind of always sat with me, just very similar, like upbringing and everything. And she was found a week later underneath her neighbor's bed, her 14-year-old neighbor's bed.
I literally watched your TikTok on this and I was like, I know your face. It is one of the most disturbing stories I have ever heard.
Yeah, it's really messed up. It was very upsetting, especially as a young person growing up in the area, because, of course, her flyer was everywhere. I saw her face everywhere. And then my mother told me, she was like, be careful of everyone around you, because even your friends, they can hurt you. Like this was the takeaway from that case. And then years later, I'm sitting at home on the couch watching true crime, and all of a sudden Josh pops up, that 14-year-old boy that killed her. And he's now an adult and he wants out of prison. And I was shook, and he's now claiming it's an accident. And I was like, it was not an accident. Because if you look at the forensics, if you knew what was going on at the time in the area, you knew that she was partially clothed. Like he'd been watching adult films in his room when he had committed the murder. He'd attacked her 3 separate times, each time putting her under the bed and thinking she was dead, and then going back. And then he was so cold-hearted, he went out searching for her with her mother and everything. And the fact that he's trying to get out of jail right now, it boils my blood. So that's when I really got my following, because I started talking about that. I had about 500K. And so just started, and that's, the world is weird because that's what I went to school for. And what's even weirder is I went to school for criminology because of Maddie. So it was really like full circle. And then started dashing in Johnny and Amber every now and then, because that is my passion project. And no one really was caring, actually. I was even losing followers when I would talk about Johnny and Amber at that point, which is fine. That was just my passion project. I love talking about. And then it really came full circle this past like month. I decided, harebrained idea, I'd been thinking about it for the longest time, but just to go up to Virginia to sit in the courtroom, just because I've been researching it for so long. And so I did it, and started doing nightly recaps. And while I was in the courtroom with Johnny and Amber, I got my 1 million followers, which was just, it was so heartwarming, because that was kind of what I started with. And it was just like really a full circle moment. But I've been mainly talking about this case because I'm a domestic violence survivor. I've been in a horrible relationship like that. And I've been really disheartened by, I believed Amber in 2016 when all of her allegations came out. I didn't watch Johnny anymore. I had been a big Johnny Depp fan, and I was like, no. And it was one of those moments where you're like, I mean, I think we all had that between 2016 and onwards, where it was like, really him? Oh, that sucks, with different actors and different, but you kind of like move on. They're just actors, like whatever. But then when all the audio recordings came out in 2020, that's when I was like, oh, there's something more here. And it really upset me that she kind of utilized the Me Too movement, utilized victims' voices to kind of propel her own career, when it seems like she's the abuser in this situation. And it's been very disheartening. So it's been an interesting ride. I've been able, fortunately, to stay in the courtroom with them for the past 4 weeks, listening to everything. And it's been wild to see people I've just read about, like their security guards, all sorts of like people just get up on the stand and tell their side of the story. And I've read all their witness statements, but it's been wild to actually physically see them.
Interesting. So I have a ton of questions about this, because I find it very fascinating. But before we get into this, we do a segment called I Love You and You're Annoying. We thought this was a really good opportunity because you are a TikToker. And as we all know, because, you know, that's Brittany's passion as well, little passion project as well as TikTok, the trolls in TikTok are through the roof. We want to ask you, we know you love TikTok. We know you love the community that you've built, but what is the most annoying thing about your platform?
I'd say it's twofold, because I have almost 2 centers of like content I create. So with the Johnny Depp stuff, it's people calling me a misogynist. That bothers me, because it's like, I've been a domestic abuse survivor. So it's like, it's not why I'm doing it. I'm not. And obviously my TikToks are a lot shorter than my podcast episodes for Innocent Till Tipsy. So it's hard to get everything into context. And I will say my recaps are a lot more short form than my old stuff on Johnny and Amber. I used to do like 40-part series on there when they were just a minute long, and try to smash everything together so I could be like, here's all the evidence and here's what you need. And like, so that's the thing I hate, is like, once you reach a certain amount of followers, they start coming for your throat. And then for the true crime, I really hate, I love it so much, but I hate it. And it is good sometimes to be like, oh, I need to do more in that area. But I usually, at the end of a true crime story, will try to mention a current missing person. And sometimes people are like, oh, you just tack them on there. And it's like, okay, but you guys don't watch if I make a minute or 3-minute long video about a current missing person. You do watch if I make an intriguing crime story, and then you get to the end and you see that person. So that's the frustrating thing. I wish they would watch, like, this is a current missing person. And every now and then there's that one video that blows up with a current missing person. But for the most part, they're like, scroll.
Yeah, I know.
It's like that's the important one.
It's sad, but it's like an ad.
It is.
Yeah.
I obviously want to talk a lot about this Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation. I am interested because when we were looking at it, I as a male, it's a very difficult thing for me to have this conversation, because I think we in the last couple of years have really, you touch base on it when it comes to the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement really was this empowerment stand by women to say, you know, enough is enough. I have a voice. I'm going to share what's going on in the real world. And then overlining or overlapping the Me Too movement has been this new push for this cancel culture that we're talking about. And I find it very interesting. And I've always inherently looked at the Me Too movement, and I thought to myself, like, you have to take the side of the victim. Like, you just have to. But it's not always going to be, like, the person who's the victim isn't always going to be forthcoming. just because they were a victim or an apparent victim doesn't mean the person who victimized them actually did that. And so we live in this society today that says, you did X, shame on you, canceled. Well, if I didn't do X and I've been canceled, do I get it all back? No. Because the whole world hates you. The whole world thinks, and it's ironic that you worked at Disney. And a lot of this case happens to do with Johnny Depp losing his essentially massive Disney contract with the Pirates of the Caribbean. So I'm interested as a former victim of domestic abuse, and someone who is now diving into this, who's seeing that there is another side to the Me Too movement that's actually very dangerous when you overlap the cancel culture, if the victim is in fact lying. What are your thoughts on this? Because if I'm you, I'm infuriated right now that someone would do this, because it actually disempowers the voice of the victim.
100%. Yeah, that it was honestly like, so on Thursday of last week, literally a week ago from when we're filming this now, Amber was on the stand and she was talking about some of the most horrific stuff. And meanwhile, I mean, I think a lot of people have realized, even without researching the case, you could tell she's lying. But with research, I'm like, okay, that photo never went with that incident before. So why, like, she used a photo from a May 21st incident for a December 15th incident. Like, and I was like, wow, we're just really like changing things up here. It's so detrimental to real victims of abuse. And it's so frustrating. I hope at the end of all of this, it doesn't tarnish what the Me Too movement has worked so hard to have happen. I mean, with people like Harvey Weinstein and everything, of course, we want to be like, done, canceled, like get out. Like there's no place for you. And that's literally what Hollywood was built off of, was this horrible, how do you say it? Like the power dynamic, you know, of like an abuse of power. And so in one ways it's like, yes, you want to cancel those people immediately, but then also we're in the United States, innocent until proven guilty. That seems to be totally forgotten when it comes to these kinds of cases. And now we're dealing with something in the huge spotlight that is becoming detrimental to the Me Too movement. That's also detrimental to male victims of abuse. I hope at the end of this, not only are women not as harmed by it, as I am kind of already almost seeing in my TikTok comments with men already commenting and being like, well, that makes sense, you know, and it's just like so hurtful. But I also hope that men are feeling more like Johnny Depp came forward. Okay, I can come forward. Like this has happened to me. And I think men often downplay their abuse. Like the fact that Johnny didn't think at first that like running away in his own home and hiding in bathrooms or having to literally leave one home. And thankfully he's privileged. He can go to another home. His suites are home, but she would even follow him to that home and like still continue her screaming at him and hitting him and everything else. And it's like, but I think with men, because there is, I want to say like imbalance of power or something when your wife hits you, or when it's just not taken as seriously as when a man like full face slaps a woman. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Yeah. We literally just talked about this, because if any of the recordings came out of like, there's one specific recording of Amber, I think she's saying like, you know, we're like
a fair fight.
It's a fair fight. You know, like, and
tell
then
the jury
she
and
says
judge.
like, yes. And she says like, tell the world, Johnny, that you are a victim, like, see if they'll believe you. If that recording was released and it was Johnny Depp saying these things, there would be, I don't even feel like there'd be a trial. They'd be like, you're done. You're done. Canceled.
He'd be crucified.
He would be.
Yeah.
And it's just wild. And it's very sad that it's not the same way. Like there's a lot of sexist shit happening within this trial, but it is so wildly, and it's embarrassing sometimes to hear. First of all, I don't know where she hired her lawyers. I feel like they're from Toys R Us. Like what is happening with them? And the one doesn't even say her name right. Literally, she was like Laura Amber Heard. And then she was like, oh, I mean, Amber. And everyone was like giddy. And I'm like, I have such secondhand embarrassment for you right now. It is so embarrassing. And then like the whole cutting off the finger, because that incident happened years ago, right? But there is 3 different stories. Amber has changed her story 3 different times, right? Like that's what she said. So
at least 3 different times.
How is this not like, okay, well, you're done. Like you're lying. I don't understand why there's been so many chances given. Like, are
Yeah.
you just not ripping your hair out when you're in
I know. So it's really hard. What I have a really hard time with the three stories, that is beyond me, especially since like I made a video on my TikTok recently about it because so many people were like, well, he chopped off his own finger. Oh, there may be some gray areas in this, but I am 100% sure that Amber tossed a vodka bottle at
Yes.
that man. It hit his hand on the marble and the tip of
Yeah.
his right middle finger came completely off. 100% believe
Yes.
that because he has never changed his story. She can't even get dates right. She says it happened by smashing a phone into a wall. She says it happened by him punching a wall, but I don't know how that would work. And then she also said that it happened by, he just did it while she was asleep and she came downstairs and she didn't see it at all. So then like, it's just the way it has morphed. And now I noticed in court the other day, it seemed to be a mixture of he was smashing a phone, but also I don't know exactly how and that's where, it's very out of hand. But her lawyers are just a treat. I believe that Elaine Brederhoft is the best lawyer that Johnny Depp has on his team currently, even though she's not even on his team. She says some wild stuff in the courtroom. It's just been absolutely mind-boggling. And now I'm like totally off track. What was your main question?
No. I wanted to speak about that because I couldn't. Miles had said I had saw something to just roll back a bit about pictures. Like I think there was something about him and it was dated, and then she would go and say, well, this happened on this date, and they were like, no, like this is the hospital record. It was on like May 8th. They weren't even there yet or something like in Australia. I don't know. I can't believe all of the chances the justice system is continuing to give somebody who literally lies like my toddler. Like it's so evident when she's lying. It reminds me of my toddler.
You're under oath.
But that's what I don't understand.
That's it. So we looked this up. My mom and I looked this up actually because we were like, why? So she is being investigated for perjury in Australia right now, just by the way, from sneaking the dogs in back in like 2015, 2016. I'd have to look at my notes. But she is still being investigated for that. But it's extremely hard to prove perjury. And this is not a criminal case. So it wouldn't be seen as like that serious to them to like pursue, and it would be a lot of like tax dollars to pursue and everything else. But I just remembered, like, to my point of like you had asked me like the question, and I was going to touch on the only thing her lawyers seem to keep bringing into the court is, yes, he was a drug addict, alcoholic. We're very much aware. I grew up with a drug addict, alcoholic. I know how abusive that situation can get, depending on the person. Not everyone reacts to stuff the same way. However, they always bring up his text messages. And I do definitely want to preface, some of his text messages were horrific, like her body in the back of a Honda Civic, but they don't bring up the context of it. Yeah. And that's always kind of what drives me bonkers sitting in the courtroom, because I know that Isaac Baruch, he had texted that to his friend, Isaac Baruch. He was telling Isaac that we're going to have to move out of our condos, the condos that I am paying for, that I loved. Like he says, like, my life it was so perfect. And then, she ruined it. And, I wish her body, I think he said to the effect, was found in the back of a Honda Civic, and it's horrible. Yeah. But what have we all said in our private messages that are just to our best friends? Like, yes, that's horrible, but it's not the same as, like, we were talking about the recordings and her saying, I was hitting you. I wasn't punching you, Johnny. You're not punched. Like, that's where it's like, okay, different. She's admitting to physical abuse.
Right. And then she pretty much calls him out on his manliness to say, okay, yeah, you've been in a lot of fights and you know the difference between being hit versus being punched. Okay, whatever. In the courtroom or in the research that you've done, has there been any evidence to support that Johnny Depp was physically violent?
So the only thing that's come up so far has been a headbutting incident. And we're talking about that on our podcast next week, I believe. It's the December 15th incident, which she's now changing photos for. So Amber has claimed that Johnny reared up and like headbutted her full in the face, broke her nose. She says her nose is broken. Mind you, the only one with hospital records from their entire marriage is Johnny Depp. But she says he reared back, full face hit her in the face with his head, and then continued his assault on her. He admitted in audio recordings something to the fact of headbutting her. Now, this is very he said, she said this point. He says that he was doing it to placate her, which everyone has testified so far. Mind you, these are mostly Johnny's witnesses. So we'll see as Amber's witnesses come forward the next like couple of weeks what is said about that. But everyone has kind of backed up the fact that everyone in Amber's life tries their best to placate her. Even her mother's text messages between her and Johnny, it shows she's like, please don't tell Amber I talked to you about this. Please don't. Like, it's very much everyone's just trying to make Amber happy. So he said they were at the end of their marriage. She had mentioned it and he just didn't want to start a fight at that point. What he says happened was she was hitting him in the back of the head. He even demonstrated it in court a couple weeks ago when he was running from her. And finally he whirled around and grabbed both her arms and was holding her like steady and telling her to like calm down. And she wouldn't. And their heads hit each other. Then he says that, he like left, he was able to leave the room somehow. I'd have to look. We will be going through this, like the actual court documents when I'm talking about on my podcast. I'm just speaking from my brain, but they'd left each other, both parted ways. And he came into the room later and she was sitting on the couch with a Kleenex to her nose. And she was like, oh, good job, Johnny. You broke my nose. Like, good job. And he, of course, he says he went into the placate mode and said, oh, I'm so sorry. Is your nose okay? Like whatever, and sat by her. He said he then waited and she went to the bathroom, their own bathroom, and then left. And so he went into the bathroom and grabbed the Kleenex up. And he says there was nail polish, red nail polish on the Kleenex.
Wow.
What we see on TikTok and what we see on Instagram are all these like 1 minute little clips. You're there for the whole case. You get to see it all. Is what we're seeing a really good reflection of what's happening in the courtroom, or is it a really good story that's being told, a pro Johnny story?
Like, and before you answer that, can you also touch on the moment that Amber Heard was like, it looks like she's posing for the, did that actually happen? Like, please, God, tell me, like.
So that was weird. So I was in court that day and she had like held her nose in like such a weird way.
The
a lot of
cocaine
people, well, this is what, so that's my suspicions, but I mean, that sounds too crazy, but a lot of people, so you don't see her take the Kleenex from the box. It was apparently in her sleeves that day. But I mean, is she bumping cocaine on the stand? Some people have said maybe it's Vicks to try to make herself cry because she's up there. She's not crying. She's making her sobbing faces. She's not crying. But that was a really weird.
She's doing that sad clown
she's
face.
Like posing for the camera to get this shot where she's like, I'm the victim here. Like, it just looks so derived. But we all know social media, and again, like we're just giving these highlight reels.
But is it actually playing out the way that we're seeing it?
Yeah, well, mind you, she did just buy that new PR team, and the PR guy did ask the court. We saw it. They asked the court photographer to focus more on her and not on as much on Johnny because he was focusing too much on Johnny. Anyways,
her new PR team is.
Well, there's been some accusations about him that I've been asked to go into, but I don't want to because I don't want to do what happened to Johnny to someone else. Sure. So, I mean, like, until I have some like solid proof of things, I don't want to be like, oh, he's accused of this, and this. Yeah. But to the point of like, is the courtroom as crazy as it's for the most part. So since this has gotten some traction, we've had a lot of fans come in and everything. And I heard some girls behind me. Would have been like a week or two ago. And the ACLU guy was on the stand, Terrence Doherty, and he was dropping bombs left, right, and center about the donations she hasn't donated and all. And he didn't want to drop these bombs. That was the fun part, but he's under oath. So he was actually being truthful. And then talking about
shocking.
The op-ed to Amber Heard and Whitney, but but also dropping bombs about how the op-ed was about Johnny and that they tried to cut him out of like every part, but obviously it wasn't completely cut. Yeah. And that's why we're in court now. And these girls behind me, they go, "Oh my God, this is so boring." And I was like,
oh my God.
Is it though? I guess if you don't know the case, it is. Meanwhile, us Johnny Depp people were like holding hands. We were like, oh my God, he could win this because it's a defamation trial. So we've been on edge about whether he should have even pursued this at all. Right. So we were like, he could like actually win this if it's proved that it's about him. But yeah, I think to the normal folk, for the most part, it's pretty boring. I think they are picking out some of the more highlighted bits. I will say when Johnny and Amber are on the stand, it's much more of an animated courtroom. Yeah. But what I did find interesting comparing the two of them, when Johnny was on the stand, you saw a lot more court reaction, a lot more people laughing, crying, reacting to his story. With
he is
Amber
a better actor.
Yeah. Oh, well. But with Amber on the stand, I haven't seen one tear shed in the audience, and the reaction has been like an exasperated sigh as we've gone through different incidents that don't make any sense. Like when she got up to talk about the Hicksville incident, which is where she claimed Johnny grabbed one of her friend's arms because her friend got too handsy with her, was jealous. They went back to a trailer where they were staying, and he threw a fit and trashed the trailer. He did trash the trailer. But she says he assaulted her as well and cavity searched her for cocaine. She said she never has done cocaine before in her life. And I was sitting there in shock because we had just heard from her nurse, Erin Borum, who not only hadn't testified about her cocaine addiction, but it was in her nurse's notes that Amber is a known alcoholic and cocaine, like she's addicted. Yeah. So I was like, girlfriend, like if we're going to lie about things, like let's
be better.
Make sure the lie is golden here. And then her talking about how she would never do MDMA again with Johnny. But meanwhile, after the fact of her saying she would have never done MDMA again with him, she had, because there's voice recording of her telling one of Johnny's head of security, saying, no, Jerry, I wasn't doing cocaine. I was doing ecstasy. Like, and she started listing off the hallucinogens, like all of, it's so wild to me.
Now, there's a new thing that I just heard. Maybe it's not new into the court case, but can we talk about the richest man in the world and James Franco?
What?
Elon Musk and James Franco. Yeah. My understanding is while she was with Johnny Depp, she was having an affair on him with those two individuals.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, so what we know so far, from my research, Elon and her met on the set of Machete Kills, which would have been in 2012, because both of them were in that film together. But she says they didn't meet until after at a Met Gala or something, whatever. But as early as March 2015, which was the same month that Johnny lost part of his finger in Australia, she was sneaking him into their penthouses because there are... the penthouse concierge have gone on record, testified to having to get Elon Musk into Johnny Depp's penthouses late in the evening and him staying the night. And then James Franco was being brought into court because that week that the week of their divorce, they're split. Johnny, his mother had died on the 20th. Then on the 21st, he went back to the Eastern Columbia building to grab his things. He had already called Amber and told her he wanted a divorce. I always like to preface this when talking about this case. If you're in an abusive relationship, please do not tell the other partner that you are leaving. It's never safe. He goes up to grab his things and talk with her. As he's talking with her, she alleges that he took her cell phone, wound up like a baseball pitcher, and threw it into her face. And then that's where that iconic bruise is. The bruise is disappearing forever in that week. It's there, it's not there, it's morphing. So that's why James is going to be called into court, because he is seen on the elevator going up during that week while Johnny is not there to the penthouses, which if that's when the so-called affair started, their relationship was basically done. But he was going to be called to testify as to whether the bruise was there or not. But they have known each other since the Pineapple Express. Johnny was concerned about her with him. There was a movie they had done. He had voiced some of his concerns in text messages and everything about them hanging out alone, things like that. She had always said that James Franco was, I don't know if I can say how terrible is your podcast?
No, we're good. You're good. You can say whatever you want.
Is it as bad as mine?
We don't often filter anything, so you should be fine.
So James Franco was supposedly rapey to her, which honestly lines up because there's a lot of underage people who have come out about James Franco contacting them on social media. So she said she never would have had anything to do with him, but apparently she would have. So
wow, that's wild. Okay, I have one more thing that I want to speak about before we wrap this up, because I think it's because I don't know the ins and outs, and I don't know if you can shed some light on this, but recently Amber was testifying and she brings up the Kate Moss incident, and you see that iconic video and Johnny's lawyers are like, yes, can you explain maybe to the listeners
why they get so excited?
Why that is such a good thing?
Yes. So I'm so excited about this. Kate Moss and Johnny had this, like, I guess you could call it tumultuous for the tabloids relationship in the 90s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Together. They were a very iconic couple. They did have one blow up fight, which was documented in the tabloids years ago. Basically, what happened was, I guess they'd had an argument of sorts, but while Kate was in a completely other room, Johnny trashed the living room area, trashed a couch, ended up having to pay an absorbent amount of fees. But when the police were called, it was loud enough for the police to be called. When they were called, he answered the door. Everyone was calm. Kate was sitting smoking a cigarette on the destroyed couch.
Right.
And he said that an angry armadillo had gotten in and destroyed, yes, the hotel, his iconic sense of humor, weirdness. So they arrested him. He was booked for criminal mischief. And then he ended up not ending up with those charges. I guess he had paid off the hotel for whatever they needed for damages. But she talked about how she had heard a rumor about Kate Moss being thrown down the stairs. Since Johnny and Amber did, excuse me, since Johnny and Kate's relationship has ended, both of them have talked about being completely heartbroken that they had ended. They seem like they're on extremely good terms. They've both spoken about each other at different parts of their lives. I'll be interested to see if, now that Amber has allowed old relationships in, now we can talk about her domestic violence charge from when she was with her ex-wife, Tasha, because she was charged with domestic violence after slapping her in a Seattle, I believe, airport in 2009. They'll be able to talk about Kate, possibly bring Kate in as a witness, or at least get a statement from her to use in court against Amber. But this also means something for Amber's side too. There is a woman named Ellen, I can't remember her last name. She's an actress that worked with Johnny during Fear and Loathing of Las Vegas. Johnny has always said that he was doing like a friends with benefits thing with her. It wasn't like a serious relationship. She wanted a serious relationship. When he broke it off, she said that things had gotten violent between them. He'd thrown like a decanter or something, which seems on brand with what Amber was saying. So, but then in the United Kingdom, when she was asked to testify about it, she let it slip that it was actually an argument he had had with other people that they were working with that were in the same room as them. And he'd thrown something at the wall at that point in time. So it wasn't about her. It was about something else. Right. So it'll just be interesting to see what gets brought into court after this, because she's now opened the door to past relationships. So we can bring in his past and her past.
I didn't realize that was like a rule. Essentially, if you're bringing up somebody else's past, then it allows and it's justified to open up the other person as well. Like you're just like, okay, we can pull all. If she didn't do that, you wouldn't be able to like or you couldn't have them as witnesses. Like that would be a no-go.
So from what I understand with this case, I'm not big into like the legal side of things on this, but from what I understand, they couldn't talk about Kate. They couldn't talk about Tasha. It was all hearsay. But now that she has brought it in, they're like, awesome, cool. Let's go. Yeah.
So my understanding is from a defamation of character standpoint, and maybe you can describe this to us a little bit better, but my understanding of it is she has said something about Johnny Depp in the public that is inaccurate and it has affected his livelihood.
Yeah, it's an article.
Right? How is that not proven? He lost hundreds of millions of dollars due to endorsements and movie rights for something that we're now clearly seeing isn't accurate. Like where does, like, when you said, yes, he can win this case, where was this not in doubt to begin with?
So I was in doubt over it just because they're two public figures. It's hard because people can say kind of whatever they want. Defamation cases are hard for like you or I to win. So for someone, you know, of the stature of Johnny, he was one of the most famous people in the world before all of this started. I was concerned, especially after he lost his libel trial with a tabloid. Mind you, it was a tabloid. I mean, they can say whatever. I was just a little concerned about where this was going to go. But I also think with her being his wife, that has a little bit more, or ex-wife now, but that has a little bit more pull to it with her first person being like, this is what happened. Now, mind you, how Amber's lawyers are arguing it is she never said his name, but how Johnny's lawyers are arguing it is she didn't need to. She said 2 years ago, she became a figure for domestic violence. Sold what happened 2 years before the article was published, her divorce from Johnny Depp, where she was paraded. And this was wild to me too, as you look into it, that famous photo of her leaving the courthouse with that bruise on her face. There was the UK judge pulled this out too. He said, why did you walk out the front door?
Yeah.
And who called the paparazzi? Because nobody knew she was going to file this TRO, this temporary restraining order. Nobody knew that day. Someone would have had to have called. And why did she walk out the front door? And to that point, this entire time, Amber's lawyers have been trying to talk about how hard Amber worked to try to cover her bruises. They showed that Milani compact that wasn't released until 2017, until after the divorce and everything. They also talked about the Amica cream, which Elaine meant was arnica cream, which is a cream that helps bruises heal quicker. Yeah. So they talked about how hard she worked to hide all of these, but then that day she didn't hide that one at all. Like it's very PR-y, it's very purposeful. And if you look at it, as hard as I've looked at it, you know that her lawyers had actually delivered a letter to Johnny before she walked into that courthouse that day with a list of demands, a Range Rover, 3 of his 5 penthouses. Was he supposed to be her neighbor? Was she going to be okay with him being her neighbor after he'd abused her? But apparently she was. So she was going to 3 of his 5 penthouses, a sizable monthly fee for him. And to get back to them before the 27th, or they would go public with abuse allegations. Wow. That's an extortion letter in my mind, but yeah. And then he went the next day and filed for divorce himself. So
can you just let everybody know what your podcast is and then take your handles so that people can look into you more?
Yes. Yeah. So if I haven't turned you off yet, my podcast is Innocent Till Tipsy. I sit down weekly. It's a true crime podcast. I sit down weekly with my friend Max, and we open a bottle of wine and we talk true crime. We usually try to have a cause at the end. Lately, it has been all Johnny Depp. So I apologize, but we do have old episodes about all sorts of things if you want to give it a listen. And we release every Wednesday. And then my TikTok is my last name, first initial, which is a nightmare, Dell'Olio D. Or you can look me up at Spirit of Danny, and Danny is spelled with an I.
Perfect. We'll tag you in the
awesome.
The bio too.
If anything positive is coming out of this, is it's giving men a voice and the courage to come out and say, you know what, I'm being abused by my partner.
Yeah.
And so if anything good comes of it, I think that's it, because there are a lot of men, believe it or not, that are being abused right now that do not talk about it because it is embarrassing. Because to Amber Heard's point, good luck. Yeah. Good luck telling the world that you're getting beaten up by your little wife.
It's sad.
That's sad.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is so cool. What a great opportunity for us to have this conversation.
Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Perfect. You have a good day.
Have a wonderful day.
There goes a sight from my soul.